Remember that trip to Hawaii? Paradise, wasn't it? He asked, smiling that smile that used to melt my heart, now just twisted my stomach. Yeah, I remember Hawaii. I remember the turquoise water, the black sand beaches, the sunsets that bled across the sky like watercolors. I remember the scent of plumeria in the air, the warmth of the sun on my skin, the feeling of happiness, or what I thought was happiness. Turns out, paradise was just another perfectly crafted stage for his lies, another backdrop for his betrayal. Hawaii, the place where everything fell apart, even though I didn't realize it until months later. We'd been together 7 years. Sarah and Ben seemed solid, right? Everyone thought so. We were the couple goals couple. Always laughing, always holding hands, always performing. Just like Mark, Ben was a master of appearances. Maybe I have a type, or maybe I'm just incredibly naive. We planned Hawaii for our 7th anniversary. A trip of a lifetime, Ben called it. And he was right, just not in the way I thought. Luxury resort, ocean view suite, couples massages, sunset cocktails, the whole 9 yards. He spared no expense, which in retrospect should have been my first clue. Guilt money is always lavish. The first few days were idyllic, just like the brochures. We swam, we sunbathed, we explored the island. We even renewed our vows on the beach at sunset. Cheesy, I know, but it felt right. But even in paradise, shadows can creep in. And the shadows around Ben started to lengthen, to darken, almost imperceptibly at first. He started spending more time on his phone, smiling at texts I couldn't see, taking calls outside, bad reception, he'd say. Excuses. Always excuses. I tried to ignore it. Vacation bliss, right? Don't let paranoia ruin paradise. But the feeling, it gnawed at me. A tiny seed of doubt planted in the fertile ground of my intuition, starting to sprout, to take root. One afternoon, we were supposed to go snorkeling. I was ready, sunscreened, fins in hand, waiting in the lobby, and waiting, and waiting. Ben was late, just finishing up a work call, he texted. Work call in Hawaii on our anniversary trip? Something felt wrong. He finally showed up, flustered, apologetic, but off. His eyes were too bright, his smile too wide, too forced. He was trying too hard, and that's always a red flag with Ben. He overcompensates when he's lying. The snorkeling was fine. Beautiful fish, coral reefs, the whole underwater wonderland. But I was distracted. Watching Ben, he seemed distant, physically present, but mentally miles away, lost in his own thoughts. Or maybe lost in someone else's thoughts. That night, we had dinner at a fancy beachfront restaurant. Romantic, supposed to be. But the tension between us was thicker than the humidity. We barely spoke, just polite small talk, forced smiles, the clinking of silverware against china, a hollow performance of romance. Then his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, a flicker of something in his eyes. Urgency? Guilt? Excitement? I couldn't quite read it. Work, he mumbled and stood up, walking away from the table, towards the darker end of the patio, his voice low, hushed, secretive. I watched him, my heart pounding in my chest, a cold dread creeping up my spine. Work call? At 9 p.m.? On our anniversary trip? It didn't make sense. None of it made sense anymore. He was gone for a long time, long enough for me to finish my entire meal, long enough for the sunset to fade, long enough for the restaurant to start emptying out around me. I sat there alone at our romantic table for two, the ocean breeze chilling my skin, the beautiful Hawaiian music suddenly sounding mocking, cruel. When he finally came back, his face was flushed, his eyes too bright again. Sorry, babe, he said, sliding back into his chair, his voice a little too loud, a little too cheerful. Emergency at the office. You know how it is. No, Ben, I said, my voice surprisingly calm, even to my own ears. No, I don't know how it is, because I don't believe you. His smile faltered. Just for a second, but it was enough. Enough to confirm the seed of doubt that had been growing inside me, blossoming into full-blown, terrifying certainty. What are you talking about? He asked, his voice defensive now, a little too sharp. That call, Ben, I said, my eyes locked on his, searching for a flicker of truth, a spark of honesty in those two bright eyes. It wasn't work, was it? He laughed, a short, hollow, dismissive sound. Of course it was work, Sarah. What else would it be? Tell me the truth, Ben, I pleaded, my voice trembling now, the carefully constructed facade of vacation bliss finally shattering, the raw fear and hurt bubbling to the surface. Please, just tell me the truth. He hesitated. He looked away, towards the ocean, towards the darkening sky, anywhere but at me, And in that hesitation, in that averted gaze, I saw everything. The truth, naked and ugly, staring back at me. It was a friend, he mumbled, finally, his voice barely audible above the crashing waves. A friend, I repeated, my voice flat, disbelieving. A female friend, Ben? A friend you have to take secret calls from at 9 p.m. in Hawaii on our anniversary trip? He didn't answer. He couldn't, because the truth was there, hanging between us, unspoken but undeniable. A silent, screaming accusation. Who is she, Ben? I asked, the question hanging in the air, heavy with unspoken dread. Tell me her name. He finally looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of guilt, defiance, and something else. Something I couldn't quite decipher then, but understand perfectly now. Resentment. Resentment that I was forcing him to confront his lies, to shatter his carefully constructed illusion of marital bliss, to face the consequences of his betrayal. Her name is Jessica, he said, finally, the name tasting like poison on his tongue. Jessica. Just a name. But in that moment, that single word detonated like a bomb, ripping through the carefully woven fabric of my life, tearing apart everything I thought I knew, everything I thought we had. Jessica. The name of the woman he'd been lying to me about, the woman he'd been sneaking around with, the woman who had somehow inexplicably become more important to him than me, than our marriage, than our 7 years together. Jessica. The name echoed in my mind, a constant, throbbing reminder of my foolishness, my blindness, my utter, devastating betrayal. Jessica. Paradise lost, paradise poisoned. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating, broken only by the relentless rhythm of the waves crashing against the shore, a sound that suddenly felt less like a soothing lullaby and more like a mocking, relentless reminder of the storm raging within me. I stared at him, really looked at him, for what felt like the first time in years, seeing past the carefully constructed facade of charm and attentiveness, seeing him now for who he truly was. A liar, a cheat, a coward, hiding behind a carefully crafted mask of normalcy. Jessica, I repeated, the name feeling foreign and ugly on my tongue. Who is she, Ben? Don't insult me with a friend anymore. I deserve the truth. After 7 years, I deserve at least that much. He flinched, recoiling slightly as if my words were physical blows. He knew in that moment that the game was up, that the carefully constructed wall of lies he'd built around us, around our marriage, around his own deceitful heart, was finally, irrevocably crumbling. He sighed, a long, drawn-out sound of defeat and resignation, and finally, reluctantly began to speak. And as he spoke, the truth unspooled, slow and agonizing, each word a fresh wound, each sentence a deeper cut. Jessica was a coworker. Of course she was. The classic cliché, the office affair, the predictable, pathetic banality of it all. They'd connected at a work conference months ago. More late nights at the office, more business trips, more hushed phone calls, more lies piled upon lies, a mountain of deceit built brick by agonizing brick. He swore it was just emotional at first. Of course he did. The cheater's favorite deflection. Just talking, he claimed. Just confiding. As if emotional intimacy wasn't a betrayal in itself, as if words could somehow be separate from actions, as if just talking wasn't the first step down a very long, very slippery slope. But then, inevitably, predictably, it had become more, much more. The friendship had evolved, he stammered, avoiding my gaze, his face flushed with shame and a desperate, pathetic hope for forgiveness he didn't deserve. Evolved. Such a sterile, clinical word for something so profoundly, disgustingly human, so deeply, unforgivably wrong. He claimed it just happened. That old chestnut. As if affairs spontaneously combust into existence, fully formed and ready to detonate, without any conscious choice, without any deliberate action, without any fundamental lack of respect for the vows, for the promises, for the person standing right in front of you, their hearts slowly, agonizingly breaking into a million irreparable pieces. He rambled on, a pathetic, rambling monologue of excuses and justifications, none of which made any sense, none of which could ever excuse the depth of his betrayal. He talked about feeling unseen by me, unseen. After 7 years of unwavering love, of unwavering support, of unwavering devotion, I had poured my heart and soul into our marriage, into our life together, and he felt unseen? The audacity was breathtaking. He blamed his own insecurities, his own needs, his own pathetic, fragile ego. He twisted the narrative, trying to paint himself as the victim, the misunderstood, neglected husband driven into the arms of another woman by my supposed failings, my supposed shortcomings, my supposed inability to see him, to appreciate him, to love him in the right way. And through it all, through the endless stream of self serving justifications and pathetic excuses, he never once offered a genuine apology. Not a real one. Not a heartfelt expression of remorse, of regret, of understanding the magnitude of the pain he had inflicted. Just excuses, deflections, blame shifting. And that, more than anything, solidified it for me. That complete and utter lack of genuine remorse, that chilling absence of empathy, that unwavering narcissistic focus on himself and himself alone. That's when I knew, with a cold, hard certainty that settled deep in my bones, that it was truly irrevocably over, that there was nothing left to salvage, nothing left to fight for, nothing left but to walk away and leave him to wallow in the wreckage of his own making. The rest of the vacation was a blur. A hollow, agonizing charade of forced smiles and empty gestures, played out against the backdrop of a paradise that now felt like a cruel, mocking joke. We went through the motions, we finished the trip, we even, unbelievably, renewed our vows on that black sand beach at sunset, the words tasting like ash in my mouth, the promises echoing like empty, meaningless pronouncements in the face of his devastating betrayal. I went through it all, numb, detached, a ghost haunting the edges of my own life, already planning my escape, already counting down the seconds until I could finally, mercifully, leave paradise behind and start the long, arduous, heartbreaking journey back to reality. A reality that would never, ever be the same again. Back home, the floodgates opened. The carefully constructed dam of composure finally, irrevocably burst, unleashing a torrent of grief, of anger, of pain, so raw, so visceral, it felt like it would tear me apart from the inside out. The tears flowed for days, weeks, months. It felt like an endless, unstoppable deluge, washing away everything I thought I knew, everything I thought I believed in, everything I thought we had. The anger came in waves, hot and searing, a burning rage that consumed me, that fueled my sleepless nights and haunted my waking hours. Anger at him for his lies, his betrayal, his utter lack of respect for me, for our marriage, for our life together. Anger at myself for being so blind, so naive, so utterly, pathetically trusting. Anger at the world for being so cruel, so unfair, so capable of inflicting such unimaginable pain. And beneath the anger, beneath the grief, beneath the raw, gaping wound of betrayal, there was a chilling, hollow emptiness, a void where my heart used to be, a silence where laughter and love had once echoed, a desolate wasteland where paradise had once bloomed, a void that felt, in those darkest hours, like it would never, ever be filled again. Hawaii. It was supposed to be paradise. But paradise, I learned that night, can be a very effective hiding place for lies. And sometimes, the most beautiful vacations are just carefully staged escapes from the truth. A truth that, eventually, always finds its way to the surface, no matter how deep you try to bury it beneath the black sands of a Hawaiian beach.